Wow, Mark Carney said something this week that no Canadian Prime Minister has ever said this plainly. He said, no one country will characterize the new world order. And that one country, he didn't have to name it.
He was talking about the G7, and he was talking about Trump sitting across from him in 24 hours. Sure, he chose those words carefully, but everyone listening knew exactly what he was saying.
Here's what happened. Mark Carney walked into Ireland the other day. You know, the country that spent centuries surviving beside a much larger power that didn't always respect their space. And he drew a blueprint for how the world reorganizes when one of the big players stops being trustworthy. Then he put that blueprint in his pocket and he's walking straight into the G7. And the beauty of it all is Washington had no answer for it.
Look, I know political speeches can feel like noise, and I get it. But this one was different. He didn't sound like a leader asking for anything. He sounded like a leader who already has the meeting before the meeting. Now, that's a very different posture, and it reminded me a lot of his Davos speech.
So today we're going to break down exactly what he said, what he didn't say, and why the timing of this, Ireland then straight to the G7, is not an accident.
All right, so why Ireland? Carney could have made a stopover anywhere, but instead he chose Dublin. So why?
Well, for a few reasons. Ireland is fascinating right now. It's a small country, but deeply plugged in. European Union, global tech, pharmaceutical industry, food exports, diplomacy, and as of July 1st,
which is only 2 weeks away, Ireland takes over the presidency of the Council of the European Union, which means that Dublin is about to set the agenda for the entire EU for 6 months at the exact moment that Canada needs Europe most.
So Prime Minister Carney chose the room very carefully before the main meeting. He goes to Ireland, a country that knows exactly what it means to share a border with a bigger neighbor that doesn't always play nice. And he delivers this speech about the world reorganizing. And the Irish understood immediately why he was there.
Yeah, they certainly did. Size is not the only measurement in influence anymore, and Ireland knows that. Carney knows it, and we wanted to be seen knowing it in Dublin before he sat down with the G7.
Now, the word Carney used in his speech that I kept hearing was rupture. He said the world is experiencing a global rupture, not turbulence, not a rough patch, a rupture, which means something has torn.
He has been saying this since Davos, and he was specific now this time about what's torn. The global trading system is under pressure. Technology is moving faster than any government can regulate. Climate disasters are no longer distant warnings. And wars aren't just tanks and missiles anymore. They travel through supply chains, banking systems, energy grids, and data centers.
And he gave real examples. War overseas, fertilizer prices go up in Canada, chip shortage, car production in Ontario slows down. Cyber attack on hospital systems, patients feel it the same week. He's not describing a foreign policy problem here. He's describing a Tuesday.
And that's his whole point. The old wall between what happens overseas and what shows up in your monthly budget, well, that wall is gone. The global game of risk eventually ends up in someone's kitchen at home. And he's walking into the G7 saying, we need to design the new rules for this now. We can't just react to it. We have to design it from scratch.
And here's the part of the speech that I really loved. He redefined what strength actually means. He said sovereignty now means capacity. It's not about flags or military parades. It's about whether your country can feed people, produce energy, build technology. Basically, keep your economy running when the world gets weird.
And when you ask those questions, Canada's hand looked very different than it did 15 years ago.
Yeah, and Carney put that in the plainest language possible. You have to know what you want, what you need, how you serve your citizens, and then go out and get it. That is not the Canada that used to call Washington before making a move. Energy, we have enormous reserves of that. When it comes to critical minerals, the whole world is scrambling for these right now, and Canada is sitting on vast deposit. And it doesn't stop there. Think about things like farmland, water, universities, AI talent, access to both the Atlantic and the Pacific and Arctic Ocean. The list goes on and on.
And then he got very specific and talked about the new technologies that matter most. Semiconductors, space-based communications, artificial intelligence, payment systems. He called all of these the new plumbing of modern life.
And you know, when plumbing works, nobody thinks about it. But when it breaks, everyone feels it immediately. And that's the point here. If those systems are controlled by the wrong hands or are built on fragile supply chains, regular people pay the price.
The Canada-Ireland deal specifically covers AI, life sciences, climate, trade, food security, and research. Irish economic analysis puts the value at around $2 billion a year in additional bilateral trade.
And that is real money, real jobs, and real research. And Ireland is about to chair the EU, don't forget that. Which means that deal has direct reach into what the rest of Europe prioritizes for the next 6 months.
Very smart man, that Carney. And then came the moment that everyone was waiting for. A reporter asked Carney directly, is the Trump administration a reliable trading partner?
And, in classic Carney style, he didn't bite. He gave what I could only describe as the masterclass in answering a question without feeding the surface. He talked about reliable partners in strategic areas, like-minded countries, shared values, climate, Ukraine, technology, security.
And then he said something to the effect that reliability is not just what someone says at a podium. It is who keeps showing up when the hard work begins.
So think about that one. He's standing in Dublin, about to walk into the G7 where Trump will be sitting across from him, and he says, reliability is not what you say at a podium.
And he said all of this without using Trump's name. He also said the Canada-US relationship is most productive when sovereignty is respected on both sides, which sounds perfectly diplomatic until you think about what's been going on these past 18 months and what it's not saying.
Yeah. If respect is not mutual, the relationship starts to rot. And that is what it's not saying. Stated in the most polished, infuriating way possible. Calmly, with complete composure. Which honestly, I think it's more dangerous in politics than yelling into a microphone.
It certainly is. And smarter. Because how do you fight back to that? Now let's talk about a bigger game here, because Carney isn't just talking about Canada and Ireland.
Nope. He's talking about a coalition. Middle powers, that's his term. Countries that are not superpowers but still have weight. Think Canada, Ireland, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and basically most European states. They all have democratic systems. They all have advanced economies and educated populations. And a shared reason to want a world that runs on rules rather than muscle and bullying.
Right, and he doesn't talk about these countries like they're backup singers to the Rolling Stones either. No, he talks about them like they can form the band and have a #1 hit. His framework is what he calls a dense web of connections. Now, you don't rely on one route or one supplier, one market, one institution, or one promise. Instead, you build enough strong connections that your country keeps moving when one part of the system fails. And we know who that is.
And he is specifically trying to position Canada as one of those backup plan countries for everyone else. We are a country that exudes reliability. And in a world full of unreliable actors, that is the rarest asset on the market.
It certainly is. Reliability becomes the product, Dave. And Canada is positioning itself to sell it. And that is Prime Minister Carney's strategy going into this G7.
And think about it, Carney is walking in with a fully formed vision of a world that functions without needing American permission for every decision. Not anti-American, he's not building a bloc against America, he is building a world that doesn't need to wait for America to sign off on everything.
Right, and the countries in that room, they see it. Ireland sees it, Europe sees it, the other middle powers see it. Canada's trade relationships are being reorganized around the entire globe right now. piece by piece in full public view.
And Carney is doing it in the most effective way possible, calmly, methodically, without raising his voice once. Which, if you follow how power actually works, that's far more unsettling for opponents than anger.
He also flagged Iran. He said that the G7 has a responsibility to build on the ceasefire progress. Moral obligation, they were his words. Another area where Canada is showing up with a position rather than waiting to be told what our position is.
So Trump, he's going to walk into the G7 with tariff threats. And Carney, well, he's walking in with a $2 billion alliance already signed. An Ireland that runs the EU for the next 6 months, and a coalition of middle powers that have already done the math.
So who has the leverage now, Donald?
I think we know the answer to that question.
All right, so here's what we want to hear from all of you.
Going into the G7, so do you think that Trump tries to punish Canada for this speech like he did with the Davos speech? Or does he even realize what happened? He's too busy paying attention to his wrestling match on the front lawn.
Well, he won't know what happened until somebody tells him. But when he does, he's going to be mad. And the bigger question is Carney's coalition of middle powers. Are they actually strong enough and long-term enough to replace American influence on the global stage?
Yep, so drop your thoughts in the comments. We love to hear from you. We read all of them.
And don't forget to give this a hype. We love those hypes, everybody. Like it, share it, and subscribe if you haven't.
And check out the pinned comment for all the fun stuff.
See you tomorrow, everyone.
Thanks for watching. Ciao for now.